Should companies be forced to disclose the health of their top executives to investors in cases like this? We want to hear from you. So go to cnbc.com/vote. Meantime, let's bring in Harvard Business School professor Bill George, who sits on the board of Goldman Sachs and ExxonMobil, and George Mason law professor J.W. Verrett, senior scholar at the Mercatus Center. Welcome to both of you. Professor Verrett, this sounds like, in the case of Mr. Munoz, a classic collision of the right of privacy in medical matters and the right of investors to need to know information that would inform their choices as investors. Where does the tipping point seem to fall?
Well, you got to look at where the tipping point falls in two different situations. First, the first question is, as a matter of law, what are they required to disclose under the federal securities laws that govern this situation? And then second is just a question of good corporate governance. What should they be providing?
What does the law say?
Well, to the first point, the law is a little bit gray. The last time investors really focused on this issue was with respect to Apple's disclosure of Steve Jobs' illness and ongoing disclosures regarding his illness. And what the law says is that if you've disclosed something already, it has to be true, and you may have a requirement to update what you've previously disclosed. That was an issue at Apple because Steve Jobs was there in an ongoing capacity despite ongoing illness. And secondly, as a matter of just good corporate governance, I'm wary of some federal mandate to, annually disclose CEO health, because I think it'll do more harm than good. But certainly, if there's a material event in a CEO's personal life that inhibits their ability to run the company, they need to disclose that. It's not clear at this point whether United hasn't lived up to its requirements to disclose. It might face some significant issues if they do decide to retain Mr. Munoz going forward, and they need to be very careful about what they do disclose, because they'll obviously possibly have a requirement to update it.
Right.
But frankly, I think the discussion about CEO health really is a side issue to the question of succession planning, which I think this issue highlights even more directly.
Let me turn to Bill George and get your reaction to what Professor Verrett just said, but also weigh in on the moral obligation, apart from the legal obligation that a company might have. And do you think that United Airlines necessarily needs to go farther than just saying the CEO is hospitalized and that's about all you need to know?
Tyler, here's the problem. You don't know what you don't know. And when a heart attack occurs, I come from the cardiovascular field, a lot of times no one knows, or the family's not saying, even the company doesn't know. So you put out an initial statement, which they did to their credit right away, saying he had a heart attack and he was hospitalized, but you don't know the severity. We all hope he can come back. We hope he will heal. And so the board can't act too quickly. The board needs to be in charge, and they need to put an interim person in charge. That is not necessarily a successor. And I think the other nuance here, Tyler, is maybe that CEO is ill but has to be treated, as, say, Jamie Dimon was at J.P. Morgan, came back very strong. And you just need to have someone in charge during the time if he's not available to serve. And so I think we need to give the board a little time. I don't think it's so bad they're coming out today and making a clear statement, because they have a lot more information than they did on Friday, other than just the top-level headlines. Bill. But I do think if he's going to be in the hospital for some time, they need to put an interim person in charge, not necessarily a successor. That can wait.
Bill, how much do we also need to take into account how important that individual, that CEO, is to the company as its value and also its future? And I'm thinking of the example of Steve Jobs and Apple, of course.
Well, Mandy, all CEOs are important to the company. Munoz is off to a good start. This company went through a very difficult ethical situation with Smisek, and I didn't necessarily agree with the way in which he was terminated. I agree with his termination. They appointed Munoz very quickly without any kind of search. But I think now a little pause is in order with some form of interim person till Oscar can come back full-time, or he may not. But I think we've seen in other cases, let's take Bob Ben-Moshe at AIG, which had a very serious case of cancer. He served for 4 more years. He paid back all of the $182 billion they owed the government, plus $22 billion in profit. but then he eventually passed away and he left at the time. So I don't think we should write off these CEOs too quickly.
Right.
Sometimes the market today is quick to write them off. Who's the new person in charge? And you need to have that succession plan clearly in place, both long-term, short-term, and long-term. But you don't necessarily trigger it right away until you know more.
And that's what Professor Verrett was saying, too, that the question is succession and making sure that that is in place. Gentlemen, we have to leave it there, alas. Thank you very much, both of you, for your insights. All right, let's lock in the vote. Should companies be made to disclose the health of their top executives to investors? Yes, say 41%. No, say 59%, Mandy.